Welcome back. My name is Matt, and today we're going to be painting the Voidtalon from the Kings of War Champions. If you haven't subscribed, please do. I'd really appreciate it. This is the champion for the Night Stalkers company box for Kings of War. It's a really awesome dead falcon zombie looking thing with flames on his wings, which is really cool. Really enjoyed painting this model. Took me about 4 or 5 hours to paint, and we're going to get right into it. The first thing I did was put a black primer over the entire model, and then instead of doing a zenithal highlight, this one I kept dark because they're undead, and anything undead I wanted to be much darker, and use the darker tone of that black to my advantage to paint this a little bit quicker. And I just picked out with off-white the flames on the wings and his tail. And also I dry brushed with a really heavy dry brush the skin that is going to be purple underneath, like the legs and his belly. And I can blend that into the black that I've already got on the model itself. So we're going to start with the base, and we're going to start with Flat Earth from Vallejo. This is a nice brown color to start with for your ground cover. And just paint the entirety of the base, ignoring all the skulls that are underneath his right foot or right claw, whatever you want to call it. And also there's two more, one to his right and his left on the base itself. Just try to avoid those. If not, it's no big deal. And now taking Vallejo's Bone White, we're going to base coat those skulls that are on the base itself. And it's really at this point, doesn't matter. I'm just trying to pick them out from the base itself to make sure that I don't dry brush over them or put too much excess paint. And of course, if you get other paint on these skulls, you can always base coat them again. And later on, we're going to finish the skulls on the base once we've finished a few other things. And as always, our paint is a 1/3, 2/3 mix, 1/3 water, 2/3 paint. And also, don't forget to paint the beak, the most important part of the model, in this same bone white color. Once we're finished base coating the skulls, we're going to use Agrex Earthshade on the entirety of the flat earth, avoiding the skulls, because later on we're going to put a black wash over the skulls itself. It's no big deal if you get the Agrex on there. You can just kind of get your bone white back on out, and you can paint over the skulls itself and the parts that you got the Agrex on. But continue to put a heavy Agrex Earthshade or heavy brown dark wash over the flat earth. Once our Agrex Earthshade or dark wash is completely dry, we're going to go over it with a Game Color Vallejo Earth. And this is going to really bring out those textures and keep the deep crevices really dark. And it's kind of a heavy dry brush. We're just going to wipe our brush off on the paper towel a couple times, and then we're going to go over the entirety of it, avoiding the skulls, of course, and the crevices. With a dry brush, you typically avoid the crevices, but try to avoid them as much as you can. And we're just kind of muting that really dark color and bringing back the deadness of the earth. And it's just a really cool highlight. And now we're going to take it a little bit further with Vallejo Game Color Khaki. And this one's going to be more of a lighter dry brush, not as heavy as the earth color. And we're going to go over the entirety, trying to stay at the tops, all the crevices. We're just trying to give the edges a higher highlight and make the earth more barren with this khaki color. The next step is our Magic Wash, our Deep Shades medium with the Cyan and Blood Scarlet inks. And you can actually do this same process with paints if you want, with the Deep Shade medium if you don't have the inks, or you can use any kind of acrylic medium with two different kinds or two different colors paints, or just a straight up purple color that you like, you just got to make sure that you add some water to it. The inks are rather thin acrylic inks, and they work very well with this step, kind of like a contrast paint, except I think there's more pigment in it, in my opinion. But we're going to cover the entire chest, and we're actually going to go up over where our dry brush was onto the black with this color as well. And we're going to put a second coat of it once we've got our whole first coat in the deep crevices of the actual body of the legs and the underbelly. And what you're doing is when you put it over the black, right at the edges, below the wings there, you're actually blending your purple color with the black color, and it looks cohesive and looks like it blends together without doing any kind of wet blending whatsoever. So I think it looks really good, and I'm very impressed with the way this deep shade medium and inks work, and it makes for a quick paint job as well. And our next step is differentiating the wings and the body colors, because we're using a cool color on the back of his body. We're going to also use a bit of a warm black, I guess you can say, with smoke black to his wings and his feathers, I should say. We're going to cover the entirety of it with the smoke black. It's actually like a grayer black, and it will differentiate in the colors, and we'll do different highlights, a cool highlight on his body and this warmer highlight on his wings, and they'll go copacetic with each other, because anytime you're doing any kind of undead, you want to use a warm and a cool, because it's both dead and alive colors. We're just going to cover the entirety of the feathers in smoke black. Now the next thing we're going to do is grab the Nuln oil, or a black wash of any kind, to wash the beak on his head, and to wash the skulls down below. This does not have to go on heavy, just a light application works. And make sure on his face, or on his bone head, that you put really heavy on the inside of his mouth and the eyes. And next is our cool colors. And you're going to notice we're going to do a lot of dry brushing with this paint job. It just works with feathers. And as far as his body goes, the top part, the wrap on around his head, and the shell on the back is what it looks like. We're just going to dry brush in gray blue. And this is a nice cool color that'll differentiate between our warm color that we're going to be putting on our feathers, and gives it a nice cohesion with each other, and separation of blacks. And once we've finished that gray blue dry brush, we're going to go with grimy gray. And for all of these dry brushes, just use straight paint and get as much paint as possible off that brush. You want very, very little on your dry brush, and you will see the results with the black. It'll really pop out very quickly. So if you have too much paint on your brush, you'll actually get big, bright colors, and you don't want that. You just want barely on there enough to differentiate what's a wing, what's a feather, and things like that. But we're going to take the grimy gray and go over the entirety of the feathers, doing strokes the opposite direction of the feathers. So if the feathers are facing down, you want to paint up. If they're facing up, you want to paint down, and left and right. It comes out with this grimy gray. It's a nice warmer color compared to our gray blue, which was a nice cool color. And they go together very copacetically and work just well to differentiate the back of his body from the feathers. And once that's finished, a little trick that I learned, I'm going to grab Green Stuff World's Rust Liquid Pigments Turquoise Oxide for his flames. I've noticed this works well. You can actually use a contrast paint. I think it's called Toxic something from Army Painter. And Vallejo has a version of this color. It's just an oxide. It's a turquoise blue, and it works very well for this application of the flames. You just cover the entirety of those flames with this color. And at this point, you can actually leave it this color if you really wanted to. It does look good, but I wanted to make it look more like the photograph on the website of what the wings look like, and painted some white over the top. And now we're going back to our bone white. This time we're going to do a 50-50 mix of water to paint to highlight our skulls. And you're just going to do it like you do a skin tone. You just paint the top of the skull, the top part of his eye sockets, and nose and mouth areas on the skulls. And then on the bird, their head, you just do the very top and the sides, kind of doing some lining on the bottom of his mouth. Don't go too heavy. When you're doing this, you want to dip it in the paint, dab it on your paper towel, and then put the paint on the actual skulls themselves. And we are going to add a little bit of off-white after that to the same mixture, a couple drops of off-white to make it a higher highlight, to highlight the skulls and his beak. And when you're doing that, you just do less and less on the highlights. You paint the very top of the beak, the sides of the beak, the edges of the beak, leaving the insides and the sides that does not hit the light alone. And the last thing to do is to take your pure white, whatever white you have. I have this intense colors because it's a heavy pigment white, and I'm going to go over the turquoise oxide that we put down previously. I'm going to keep it heavy on the ends, and I'm going to heavy dry brush towards the center. If you get a little bit on the wings, it's no big deal. It just adds to the look of the model, and like as if that blue-white flame is actually glowing on the actual feathers themselves. But do it heavy on the ends and light on the inside, taking away most of that oxide, but it's actually bleeding through that white on the majority of it, and it looks great. And once you got that pure white on there, we are finished with the Voidtalon. All it needs is a couple tufts on the bottom of dead grass, and I think it turned out awesome. And it's actually a really super easy paint job. Also, most of the Night Stalkers I find that are going to paint up fairly quickly. I do like them. It wasn't an army I chose. That's why I like the way Champions is doing things. Is small model count, and it gives you the opportunity to paint different stuff. So he turned out great, and thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't. That's all I've got. Ta-ta!